Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and we have another version of Forbidden Music. And in this case, I'm going to go back to a forbidden that is one of the big forbiddens, to my knowledge. We're going back to the Prince well. Prince and his estate did not want a bunch of music piracy on YouTube and stuff, and so this is one of the ones, to my knowledge, that you don't get to put on and do a react of. But Forbidden gets to do whatever it wants because you're not actually hearing most of the sound. But you will hear little snippets of it. So Purple Rain is the track that we're doing. And it's an interesting one, partly because it's so 80s it hurts. It's super relentlessly 80s. And there's various gear associated with that, but it's really more about the effect that that gear produces. Like, rather than go, okay, we need to use this particular room synthesizer, and then we need to use this AMS reverb on this and that and the other thing, it's more along the lines of like, go for stuff that can be deep and vivid and lots of reverb and lots of stuff going on there. Identify when things like gated reverb are in use. Go for processing that lets you produce this kind of hyped up sheen, because it's not necessarily simply a matter of like, yeah, boost 10K really, really loud. It's the vibe and the style that you get out of that kind of boost and that kind of, compression and overprocessing and such. And there is an end result that is huge and dramatic and spectacular by design. That is absolutely the intention there. And it's a triumph out of Minneapolis. One of many triumphs out of Minneapolis. I would point out the first thing you're going to hear is going to be guitars. And then the song kicks in and you'll hear a lot of gated snare, or at least a lot of huge sounding snare. Sometimes the way you get huge sounding snare like that is you have a relatively dead snare, like the batter head is tuned down so that it's just a thwack, and then all of the sustain is being made up by reverb. And it happens to be a reverb that is bright and sparkly, but also feels kind of receded. It feels kind of, there's space in there. It's not just hitting a white noise and going psh. The guitar, in particular, when we get into lead guitar, which you'll hear little snippets of as well, one of the things about that is you got your Strat sound, the shredding, honestly rather Hendrix-like ability Prince had to shred on the guitar. But there's an interesting quality that I think I picked out. And it is not simply the fact that it's running through your like 80s ambience processors and things. I often feel like I hear Delta Labs Effectron in these, because that did a lot of doubler and flanger stuff with a very distinct 80s sound. Delta Labs Effectron is a digital delay that doesn't actually quantize. Instead, it's using sigma delta processing and it's delaying that. So you can make it be kind of, the sample rate will go low and it'll start interfering with the sound. But even when you do that, it has this weird character to it. And mostly it's about just a pretty crystalline, but not particularly quantized sounding shimmer going on. And in the 80s, they threw shimmer and ambience on literally everything. And that's on the guitar in a big, big way. But listen for kind of the wiriness of the guitar, because one of the things I would point out about the tones in here, in particular, I think I recognize this about the guitar tone, is that I don't think this is a high gain pickup. it sounds, there's a characteristic in there which reminds me of my radial Telecaster. I have a radial Telecaster, and the reason I got it, and it was very cheap, was because it was a giant piece of junk that was all rusted out and obliterated. It played, it was weirdly heavy, but also the pickups in this thing were so clapped out and microphonic and like weedy sounding and just thin and nasty. That is sometimes the sound that cuts right through a mix. It works really well. Jimmy Page would do that with like Dan Electro guitars and those lipstick tube pickups. And if you're picking a single coil guitar, like for instance the Telecaster, or indeed a Strat, one of the things that could work is finding one where the pickups ended up kind of underwound. An old one where it's like pickups, normal pickups, rather than some kind of fancy modern thing or lace sensors or whatever. But then rather than going for the high output guys like modern folks do, go for underwound pickups or those old ones where they are microphonic and tinny because it's not even wax potted or anything like that. And the vibe of the string comes ripping through with this real intensity. And you'll be hearing that on the bits of guitar that you hear in this track, which granted, it's a forbidden music, so you only get to hear little snippets of it. But you'll find that you hear how the drums and things work right away. That stuff jumps right through even like less than 1 second snippets of sound. And I think the same is to be said for, say, vocal mixing and how much reverb is on things, and that guitar. Because it's that sound of getting the kind of weedy, thin-sounding lead and getting enough gain that it really is able to speak forth, and then layering it with a bunch of additional ambience on top of that, but have it be 80s ambience. So it's got that excruciating brightness rather than just being ambience that will make it warm and full sounding. And there you have it. Purple Rain is a spectacular track. It's a closer to the album and a closer to the movie, and really just goes the distance. And boy, does it go the distances, as long as the whole Sneak and Sally medley that I put into the $10 Nut Patron video this week. It's really neat. I wish you luck in studying the bits of this that you can hear and study what you're seeing. You'll also notice that one of the things about 80s sound is in that top meter, Airwindows Meter proper, the second one down, the slew meter, the one where it gives you like red spikes wrapping around to the bottom again if things are too bright. And on Sneak and Sally, one of the things that was happening is you had a clap that would come in, and there's a bunch of chamber reverb on the clap, and you hear it just as a bright psh, psh. That percussive element sat as a little dense spark of bright red high frequency peaks exactly at the top of that meter just before wrapping. Nothing came through the bottom, but it was just a bright, dense spark. That's probably a good way for stuff to sound naturally. That's where you'd mix it if you have that kind of sound. By the same token, this is 80s land, so you have to be brighter than that. So what you'll see is especially cymbals coming through. And when they go into the final huge bursts of cymbals and just giant walls of sound that are also walls of brightness, you'll see that rather than go right up to that point, it goes just past that point into a big dense burst of high frequency slewing, just a little bit farther than it should if you're mixing that way. Again, 80s. If you like 80s brightness, then you know to just make it wrap just a little bit. That's where it wants to sit. And you also see on the bottom meter, which is the one ConsoleH, ConsoleX2, etc., that's where you start getting splashes of white or cyan. And on that bottom meter, cyan means you're going for super extra bright at that stage. And where it sits is probably under the 6 dB mark, but it'll push just a little bit over. And yeah, this shows you the way that you can go about doing certain styles of mixing and getting similar results. In particular, one of the things that you'll get from this, it has got that degree of super bright 80s-ness, but study how far it's willing to push that brightness, because modern mixes are capable of going way brighter than that, and it won't necessarily get you the vibe. It'll get you a feeling of, wow, this is a super modern mix. It's kind of hurting my ears and tickling my brain. And some people like that. But if you're going for the big 80s style of super bright and ambitious, this is a real good picture of exactly how that comes together in metering. With no further ado, let's play Purple Rain. Something new. You say you want to lead up. Let me guide.